Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast, where I give you my unfiltered takes straight off the cuff, and today I'm going to be talking about the new record from Conway the Machine, God Don't Make Mistakes. So I am absolutely not familiar with this guy's music whatsoever before this first, listen of this new album, and I know it's a little bit old. I saw some people talking about it. I know it's got a bit of buzz, so it's one of those albums that I've had on the back burner for a little bit. And intended to listen to, but yeah, essentially what you're getting here across this album is a personal but grimy, kind of like boom bap hip hop album, essentially. Front to back, you've got a great set of instrumentals that are all, again, very boom bappy. You get a mix of kind of like the grimier like gangster cuts and some more sentimental and introspective cuts. And overall, it's just a really good balance, especially considering who the MC is behind the album. Conway the Machine paints himself as a person really well. I haven't ever heard of him before, like I said, and I feel like I have a great idea of who he is to some extent, or at least the story that he's kind of like been through, warts and all. And that's a crowning achievement for sure. Like, I can tell you a decent number of events that have happened in his life that have helped shape who he is, essentially. So that's a really cool thing to have for a hip-hop record, especially one that's as tight as this. It's only like 40 minutes long, and there really isn't a ton of, like, I don't know, wasted time or too much overlap. Like, overall, the vibe is not the most varied in the world, but I feel like each track gives a decent kind of like piece of the story, I suppose, which is really good. And the other thing is, I'll say as well, is if you listen to a good amount of hip hop, nothing on here will shock you, especially, but everything is executed really well. Like, this is a top notch set of beats for the most part. His flow is fucking awesome. At some parts, he sounds like incredibly mean and savage. Other parts, it's like, he brings like a very sentimental vibe to the kind of poetic like depictions of his own life events, I guess. So I guess I should just go through the songs. The first track, Lock and Load, is pretty much just a super gritty track from all angles. It has a very classic sounding boom bap beat with these swirling synths over the top, but the real focus is on the ultra gritty street bars. Conway flows effortlessly over the instrumental, and it's a really solid opening cut for sure. The next track, Tear Gas, is essentially the same vibe, but it has a vocal sample incorporated into the beat, plus it has a really fucking sick bass line that I really enjoyed. One thing that was hyper unexpected as well is, across this record, for such a personal album, it's got a decent number of guest verses, which I suppose isn't too surprising for the kind of album it is. But Lil Wayne on this track fucking brought it unbelievably hard. I'm not the biggest fan of Lil Wayne at all. I know some of his earlier stuff is pretty well liked by critics and like hip hop fans in general, but he was just really high energy, and I was shocked at how well he fit over such a grimy fucking banger. I'm not the biggest fan of Rick Ross, but he was incorporated to the track well. Having said that, like the flow was still kind of repetitive and not for me, and I can't say that this verse especially changed my mind on him, but still overall a very good song. The next track, Piano Love, continues with the like just gritty gangster kind of vibe, but maybe takes it a shade darker. And it features a piano leap that almost, I was kind of surprised to hear this as like an influence, I guess, but it almost reminded me of something that Tim Hecker would have pulled off on Virgins, with like, it's just a much darker vibe for sure, and it makes sense because the track deals with pretty classic like drug dealer type stuff, but it's really well executed, and Conway just sounds ultra fucking mean on this track. Another really good one, essentially. Drum work continues this like slightly darker vibe, but structurally it doesn't have a chorus, it's just 3 verses, and it's a solid track for sure, but on a first listen, it's way too lyrically dense to really give like a proper opinion on. I feel like I will say that like energetically, every MC brings like a solid performance. But yeah, it's just way too much on a first listen to give like a proper kind of like overview of. But yeah, no, I enjoyed the song. And then so those 4 cuts are, like I said, the album opens like really gritty, but after this point is where the more sentimental or introspective or otherwise more vulnerable moments come from, I suppose. Wild Chapters is a song that essentially talks about essentially just the chapters in Conway's life. The instrumental is just a lot brighter than all the cuts so far as well, which assists in the vibe of the track. It has a more sentimental feel with like a sung chorus, which again is a new thing for this album so far. I do wish that the only verse that Conway has is the very first one, and for the first introspective track, it's good and you get some nice like information and background details, but I do kind of wish that he had all the verses on the track, because I feel like the instrumental would have supported a very kind of personal painting, essentially. But you have a load of guest verses on the track, and obviously they're from a different perspective. It's not a bad track. Oh, sorry, pardon me. It's not a bad track at all, but it does add a nice little break from all the grittier tracks. I just wish that maybe it was it was a little more Conway on this track, I suppose. But like I said, there's no lack of that from this point on, so it's really not the biggest criticism at all. The next song, Guilty, is another brighter, more introspective cut. I love the extra little percussive sound over the snare. I don't know, I have no idea what it is, but it just sounds really cool. It's like a nice little flavour. And that's one thing I will say actually about all the instrumentals across this record, just in general. There's, like I said, nothing's going to shock you in terms of like a crazy experiment or anything like that, but there are loads of little details that add a lot of flavour to these instrumentals, even if they're not ultra detailed as such, but it feels like every element is very purposefully placed, and I really enjoy that vibe. So yeah, this little extra sound over the snare is really cool, and lyrically, this is the first you hear about, or at least I think the first you hear about, a near-death experience Conway had, essentially, where it sounds like he got shot either in the head or somewhere like in the neck or something like that, and apparently the hospital told him he was going to die and that kind of thing. So it's just a really it's a really good track. Again, a more introspective one, so that is nice to kind of like break up the record with that. Then the next track, John We Flick, is back to the straight grimy vibe. You've got Benny the Butcher on the track, who just delivers an unbelievably cold verse on the song. It's really, really good. It's solid for sure, but it doesn't bring a ton new to the table, especially I think at this point I was maybe a little bit like, I hope there's more introspective stuff, and being another like grimy banger that I didn't feel like especially broke away from any of the first four was maybe a bit like, I don't know, maybe it was wearing me just a touch at this point, but it's not a bad song by any stretch. And like I said, that Benny the Butcher verse really is worth listening to the track for that alone. The next song, Stress, delivers in exactly the way I was hoping, though. Again, it's a more introspective song about Conway's life and the various pressures he feels. The verses are really personal, actually, on this one. Talking about, different friends he had that have been killed and whatnot. And it's great. Like, verses, instrumental, all of that stuff is great. The only thing I'll say is I do wish that the hook was a little different. It's not, like, awful or anything, but it is just a little wordy, and something about it feels kind of clunky. And especially considering the songs, I think it's like the longest song on the album as well. You hear it like quite a lot throughout the record. Throughout the song. So that was kind of unfortunate, but again, not like the biggest deal or anything. Overall, the instrumental was solid, though I liked the fact that it was very mid-paced and downtrodden, which is kind of like a newer vibe on the album, because even the more sentimental and introspective cuts don't sound quite as like downtrodden as this one, I guess. There are a good number of like washed out background elements, which is cool as well. But it all comes back with the next song, So Much More, which I actually think is probably one of my favourites on the record. It's another more introspective song, talking about Conway, kind of where he is right now, his place in the rap game and all that good stuff. The instrumental is fucking just awesome on this song. It's like one of my favourites on the record. Overall, it's just a really solid track in the listing, essentially. Channel Pearls, I have no idea how to pronounce that. This one's just like a really laid back, sort of like slightly R&B song, I guess. Honestly, this one didn't grab me a ton. I barely wrote any notes for it, so just kind of like, I don't know, it was just sort of okay, I think. Probably one of the weakest tracks, I thought, personally. But again, nothing on this album was terrible. I think overall it's a very consistent album in terms of quality. But the next song, Bubbas, is another huge highlight for me. I love the contorted synth on the track, and then Keisha delivers this first verse that's just incredibly, not only just cold, but very detached, and very descriptive. And it just talks about a bunch of like violence, essentially, or at least that's a huge element of it. And I felt like that plus the off-kilter vibe of the whole track just worked really well. Conway's verse on the end was great too. So yeah, Bubba's definitely highlighting the track listing, had a bit of a different vibe to everything else, but still felt very cohesive with everything else here. So another really, really solid track, and it absolutely sticks the landing as well. The final track, God Don't Make Mistakes, is a huge set of bars from Conway, essentially pondering his situation. He looks at the path his life has taken, how things have lined up, how different influences have affected him, and all that kind of stuff. He ponders occasionally over how things could have been different, if he maybe wasn't so successful in the rap game and that kind of thing. Overall, the whole thing just feels like a really, really good wrap-up of everything, all the thoughts, all the varied kind of like stories that he's painted over the whole album. It does a great job of, just tying it all up in a neat little bow with a solid kind of like, what's the word? Like a solid thematic close, I suppose, of this idea of, fate and determinism and all that kind of different stuff. Hence the title of the track, God Don't Make Mistakes. So yeah, it's just a really, really good ending song for a great record that overall initially I would thought would be maybe a little bit run of the mill, but I'm glad that different vibes were brought in over the course of the record, and it was all, I think this final track does such a good job of bringing both of those, I don't want to say halves because it's more than just halves, I guess. Maybe you could say like all of the sections of the record together, I guess. And just ties it up in a neat little bow. But yeah, if you're looking for like a gritty, well-produced boom bap hip hop record with some conscious elements, definitely give this a shot. It's just a great depiction of this guy's life, and again, like I said, I feel like I have a really good idea of who Conway is, which isn't something that you get on so many of these records, especially when they go for the slightly grittier side of things, and there's more of an emphasis on just like hard bars and that kind of thing. So it's as good as everyone else said it was, pretty much. It comes together as a really good little story record. If you're into hip hop, don't give this one a miss. I'd say it's pretty much essential listening. I need to get onto the new Benny the Butcher record, actually. I'm probably going to end up enjoying that, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, big recommendation. Go check this out. Solid record. Just listening. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast, all right? Peace out, everybody, and I'll hopefully see you in the future.